This is Codex Machina, a podcast where we discuss reading, publishing, and all things books.
And here we are, back to talk about books in the Strangeland Book Club.
Today we're talking about The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. And as always, spoiler warnings for the entire book. We do talk about the whole plot all the way up to the ending when we do book club episodes. So just so you know.
It's hard to avoid, but I don't think spoilers actually spoil the book.
I don't think so either. I'm never afraid of those because, like, the journey of getting to a plot point is what is interesting, not the plot point itself, right?
And I think this book is a real personal experience book. Like, whatever one person gets from it, someone else is going to get from it. And I think, that's something that I realized when I saw it was initially published in Japan in 1994, how timeless this book really is. It was translated in 2019 into English, and it made a huge success when it came out in English, rightfully so. I think a lot of people kind of compared it to our digital age now. I don't see it that way, but I also don't think it's a book that's necessarily rooted in any particular time. I think it can relate to any time period. It's timeless. And so
let's just jump right into it. What do you think about it makes it timeless as opposed to being of a specific moment or fear?
Well, I think the nature of the story, like I said, it's quite personal to the reader. And there's nothing in it specifically technological, really. There's nothing that puts it in any specific time. But certainly it has a place. You can, to me, it's very a common background for a setting for Japanese novels. But as far as time goes, it could have just as well been written today, I think.
Yes. Or 20 years earlier.
Right.
Yeah.
I have to admit, I was not aware it was published in 1994.
Oh, interesting.
It never occurred to me. I just assumed it's 2020 International Booker Prize shortlisted novel. So I somehow just assumed it's a recent novel because I think also this edition that most of us have, we all have, right? The vintage edition of The Memory Police. And I just assumed it's something new that came out recently because it appeared in a bookshop. And I was like, oh, that's a new novel. And it kind of reflects the hype that we have of Asian literature, East Asian literatures at the moment. So I was like, oh, that must be like today. And I completely read it as something incredibly recent. However, I feel like what also adds to this timelessness is the fact that there is no clear 100% indication in the novel itself, right? We don't really see a lot of references to things we would normally use to date a story.
Yeah, there's no cell phones. And
yeah.
She is at one point in the story working as a typist. So you can kind of say, okay, yes, there are typewriters, if not computers, but she's working on a novel written by hand.
But I think it's an interesting point because obviously it's not going to win the Booker until it's translated into English. So I think this is, kind of an interesting way to look at how translations work and think, 25 years later, it gets translated into English. So that would be an interesting rabbit hole to go down. Why did it take so long? What made it come on the radar?
And I do think, yes, it's very timeless, but I do think there are certain themes and messages that are very timely for our moment. And, you said there's a lot of people talking about kind of how they can relate in the digital age. And I'm like, I can see why an editor would be looking for a book like this right now, right?
And I mean, especially if you think about, the way the world is currently in 2025, you've got policing of books, of banned books, these kind of things. You have policing of thought, of speech. diversity things. I think it's, certainly something that might be on your mind. Although for me, I didn't even really think about that as I was reading this novel. For me, it was, and it took me a long time to kind of get with this, because for me, it was a very emotional read.
So,
Yeah. And I came out of it at the end quite stunned, really, because I wasn't really sure what was going on in my mind with relation to the book. As I was reading it, I felt that it speaks to grief quite a bit. And I couldn't really quite figure out why. And it took me some days of thinking, why do I think of grief specifically? Because, I mean, you can see it, but you can also see other aspects. And so, a little backstory. So I had two good friends that were killed by a drunk driver in 1991 when I was young. One of them was one of my best friends. And for me, this was a very weird experience, because having lived with a chronic illness, I always expected to be the one who would be the one who died of a friendship. And it's not that I didn't have older relatives that died, but having a friend, a contemporary my age, die and suddenly was, mind shattering to me. And so really my process of grief was quite intense. And it was one of these things that everything in my world just disappeared one by one. The things I loved, the things, anything, all my joy in life was just gone. And I felt like I could not come back out of it. Like something kept pushing me. And to me, this is like what the memory police do. Just forget everything. You're in this grief and this process. And so, even to the point that my illness got bad, I almost lost my kidneys. I was sick, and it took friends to kind of say, something's wrong with you. You need to go to the doctor. And so really I couldn't write anymore. I had been a very, profligate poet until that point. I couldn't write anymore. I couldn't read anymore. I couldn't do anything. And so I was kind of left just as the woman in the book, a voice that was slipping away. So for me, like, this experience really kind of, it put these things together, and it kind of gave me a little bit of therapy to kind of work through this process and what I went through with my friend's death, and think, yeah, this book to me speaks to this grief and this grieving process, and how it kind of destroyed me and put me in this, place of almost becoming, disappearing in the same way the woman in the book does. And that's when all the tears came out from the book.
yeah, I mean, that is a really powerful story. Thank you for being willing to share it. I know that's very personal.
Mhm.
I'm so sorry that that's something you went through, but it does make me think about how powerful books actually are for us as a society. Everyone should be able to read. Books should be available to people. We've been talking on this podcast a lot recently about banned books and, why access to books is important. And I think that's a really clear example of what books can do and why people should be allowed to have them. Yeah. I mean, I also felt a really personal and emotional connection to this book for completely different reasons, Like, I don't have this story of grief, but I have the experience of being someone who moved a lot during my life, both as a child and as an adult, and not keeping a lot of things, not necessarily being able to hang on to friendships when I left a place, not being able to hang on to objects or sentimental items. It's not like I'm going to forget birds, but I'm like, do I remember what my room looked like when I was 7? Not really. I don't even know if I have photos. And yeah, I do have a couple of photo albums that I drag with me from place to place that I like to look at because it helps me remember these things. And I'm like, if someone took those photo albums away from me, would I have any memories of my life? Because I don't have these objects. And Yeah, I mean, we don't think of objects as necessarily the memory itself, but like, how long can you remember something from when you were 9?
Right. I mean, it's a tether. Yeah, the object is a tether to these memories, and I think it's very important from that respect.
Yeah, I have my baby blanket. There are a couple of things that I hang on to, right? Yeah, and I think the most affecting thing for me in the story was when she forgot how to write a novel because novels had been taken away.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, if that happened to me, I would also disappear, I think.
And I was really shocked when that happened. So, just to clarify, in this novel, what happens is every once in a while, for whatever reason, things are disappeared. And I think that's also a very interesting take, that it's not like they disappear on their own volition. No, they are disappeared by someone. And then everyone else has to be complicit in making sure, as a society, that they have been disappeared completely, these things. And of course, when for our protagonist, who's a writer, she's in the middle of writing a novel. She's actually in a little bit of a writing slump, I guess. She's just like not sure how to continue. And then one day she wakes up with this feeling of, oh yeah, novels disappeared. And then she forgets completely how to write, how to string sentences together. That does not really affect speech, right? People can still speak to each other. But sitting down to write a coherent narrative is not an option anymore. And the way she tries to kind of bring it back, and that's what I think also kind of added to this immense feeling of grief, that they actually don't really have a way out of it. And I think that's what was so tragic to me, that however hard they tried, they could not bring back the objects or the memory of them. For instance, the old man, one of the sweetest characters in this novel, he got gifted a music box that was supposed to hopefully kind of revoke these feelings and emotions that people had when they heard music. And he confessed to the protagonist later on that it still didn't really work.
Yeah, the hearing the music didn't actually bring back the memories or emotions.
Yeah, so however hard he tried. And I feel like now we are so used to having like a lot of these stories when if you just try hard enough to resist, it's gonna work, like till the very end. I was hoping, yeah, there will be that one moment when he will finally have some sort of emotional response to the music, or the protagonist, she will be able to return her ability completely to write proper novels. And it never came back, however hard they tried. And I feel like this futile effort is what's so tragic about this book as well, that there is no way out. On the cover, there is a blurb that says that this book echoes the themes of George Orwell's 1984, but it has a voice and power all its own by time. And yes, I feel like the vibe is there, but the book is not at all what 1984 was.
It's more tender.
I don't know, is more reminded of The Giver.
I haven't read that.
Okay, it's a kid's book, actually, but it's about a guy who is the repository of memory for a community, and he's the only one. And I think the protagonist, is 12 and gets chosen to be the new one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really powerful, emotional book about memory. Is it being able to experience taste and color and these things? And that's actually, I think, what was coming to mind a few times for me when I read this book. Now, the authoritarian element of the book is very subtle, actually. And, there are the memory police. There are the trench-coated figures who go around and collect all of the birds or all of the postage stamps or all of the novels and burn them and make sure no one has any and can't remember. But they don't cause the memories to disappear. That happens internally. You forget before the object is taken. You will forget and you will look at the object and go, oh, I don't know what that is. And then the memory police come and take it away. And you're like, yeah, sure. Right. I have no emotional attachment to that. Have it.
And I mean, to me, the memory police themselves were kind of, because they didn't seem to be affected by these disappearances. Even when the legs went away, they seemed to still function normally. And for me, the memory police was the personification of grief, kind of pushing you down, forgetting the world, forgetting everything around you, and only kind of settling in grief. because in that grief, like for myself, nothing else existed but my grief. And I didn't care, that I didn't see anything else the same way because my grief was overwhelming. And so for me, the memory police didn't essentially exist. They were the personification of grief. And I feel like, when you see that, both of her parents were gone, and then kind of when the old man dies too, is when she slips even more into just becoming a voice and then becoming nothing.
Yeah.
And so to me, like, that's why that experience really kind of honed in, even as this authoritarian thing that you could easily see it being something else or some kind of, dystopian world where you've got this police force that's keeping you from, trying to take people who do still have memories, which is another part of the book. Her mother still had memories of things. Her editor, whom she saves, still has memories of things.
Yeah.
And so these are the people that the memory police try to take away so they're not interfering with, this absence of memory. And, in a sense, these people who had the memories were my friends that were trying to bring me out of this deep grief and remind me of the world. But I couldn't, it was just like this thing that doesn't mean anything to me,
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that's why, this thing kind of really dug deep into my own experience.
Yeah, the memory police never seemed at all scary to me in the book. Like, they can show up without warning and they can search your house whenever they want to, but they're not very threatening, if that makes sense. They're more of an inevitability that a totalitarian government, you don't know who they work for, you don't know why they do it. Like, it's very interesting to not answer those questions. I think it's doing something. It is reflecting on the concept of authoritarianism, but it's not saying the government is doing this to you, and it's kind of letting you sit there and reflect on these other possible, more personal interpretations. And I love when an author and a book gives the reader space for that kind of thing.
Yeah. I caught myself thinking at some point when the protagonist went to find out what happened to the old man when he was apprehended by the memory police, and she went in there to their headquarters to, figure out where he is, what happened to him. And I was thinking, like, so what happens to the memory police? Do they also lose things, or are they exempt from it? We never find out. Like, did they also lose their legs, or were they spared in this respect? Because, they kind of probably need to be able, to chase people. I don't know. Fascinating. So, and we never really find out. To me, of course, as a legacy of George Orwell and like Aldous Huxley, you do imagine behind the closed doors of these headquarters that they do have all of these things. They kept the birds and the ribbons and the roses and the novels because as someone who have this power and authority, they probably also get some privilege of maintaining these things, but we never really know. This is just something I like to imagine because to me that sounds like a natural thing in a dictatorial regime. But at the same time, the novel really ever touches upon that. That does not matter at all.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I mean, there was a bit in the book where it seemed to indicate, the memory of birds has been taken, right? Nobody knows what a bird is. And it's assumed no birds on the island. Except that there are. They can't stop birds from flying there. And the protagonist does see a bird during the book burning. And she knows what it is and she names it and then it's gone again. And I was like, what is this story telling me? Like, yes, there are the memory police and they're authoritarian, they're taking things away, but you have every opportunity to get it back and you just don't. And I'm like, that is so interesting, and, the ending of the book really seems to be indicating that once everybody who's affected by this process disappears because they've forgotten their bodies and their minds and all of these things, the people who aren't affected, like the editor she's hiding in her house, will be free to just move around and meet each other again and carry on the legacy of this island, which to me indicates either that the memory police are also affected or that they will give up and go away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, what does that mean?
Yeah. What is the end of this story, like in the end?
Well, and I guess that's why it all kind of filtered into this idea of the grieving process, because it all just kind of fit when I thought about it. Obviously, I don't know exactly what the author was thinking when she wrote it. And I think a lot of people can get very different feelings from this. I think there is certainly a sense also of obsolescence, how things start to become unimportant when we as a society get more obsessed with other things than we can replace things easily with something else and stop thinking about something else. It's the same thing like, when I was growing up, everybody memorized phone numbers. Well, now we have them in our phones. Why do we need to memorize them?
We were talking about how we were going to record this episode, and a couple of days ago, I get these weird things in my brain where I'm like, I need to imagine a worst case scenario because it's practice for like what I would do if it happened to me. And I'm like, okay, I'm on a bus and I'm on the way home. What if something happened and I needed to borrow somebody else's phone to call my wife? I do not remember her phone number. And I was like, oh my God, I'm thinking about this book. And I'm like, oh God. And then I thought, it's okay because when I was like 10, I memorized my dad's phone number and I've known it my whole life. He has never changed his phone number for like 30 years. And I'm like, I'll call my dad because I know his phone number. And then I started saying it out loud to myself. And I'm like, I forgot the area code. I don't remember the area code anymore. I couldn't call my dad either. It's time to give up. I've disappeared.
That's how it works. I was just now thinking, I still remember my very first phone number I've ever had back home. And I was like, oh, do I know my current phone number? No, although I've had it for years. I'm like, no chance. I always have to go into, like, when people ask me, I have to go into the WhatsApp to see, like, what was my phone number again? Yeah, so that's quite a realistic situation, really, with forgetting, indeed. So one more thing I found out fascinating about this novel, that it is not a very large novel, right? It's about not even 300 pages, right? 274 pages, and we have a novel within a novel, right? So our protagonist, she was working on her novel of her own, and unfortunately, she's never really finished it. It kind of left, I don't want to say open-ended. I don't know if we can say that, because I just always like to imagine a happier ending for everything, although that ending devastated me. I did not see this coming. I guess I'm a child of those dystopian novels where, like, there is some kind of hope on the horizon. Yeah, but in this case, I don't really know. And I feel like as readers, we are also left with one big question of why was this happening, right? Again, it's never really answered in the novel. But what I found so elegant is the novel within the novel that reflects everything that is happening to the protagonist and people around her. But it is a reflection, right? So it's kind of like
It's reversed.
It's reversed, mirrored. I don't even know if better to say like upside down, even in a way.
Maybe, yeah.
Because maybe I'm hallucinating, maybe I'm imagining things, but it seemed to me that in the novel, the protagonist is writing, a lot of things were reflected that were happening to her in real life. For example, she was hiding her editor. I also love this, like how a writer's first thought is like, oh my God, they're going to take my editor away. And and so she's hiding him in her basement, basically. It's like a room in the
In between her first and second.
yeah. So it's sort of this like weird space, but to get in there, you have to go down this little stairs
Right.
that they installed. And she did go to quite a length with making this arrangement, right? The old man helped her to like install plumbing in there. I'm like, is it just like a random person? Is it a skill everyone should have to know how to install a plumbing in a hidden room in your house in case you need to hide an editor? I don't know.
I mean, I guess if the world was that fucked up and you really needed to hide someone who was going to get kidnapped by the police in your house, you'd figure out plumbing, right? You'd find a way.
Yeah. True. And then you're like, okay, ChatGPT.
Don't be silly. That's why plumbers make YouTube videos.
Oh, God bless all the crafts and handiwork videos.
I'd rather have an old man come do all my stuff.
He's also a very nice person. He was so thoughtful and tender, and I don't know, that was really one of those things when the character is also described as the old man. That's all there is. That's his name.
Well, yeah, nobody has a name.
In the novel that the protagonist is writing, we see the reverse situation of a woman who was a typist being in a relationship with another man who actually was her tutor. And then as times go, she suddenly loses her voice. Right. So what she gets to do is only use her typewriter, or like, of course, like handwritten notes, but typewriter is kind of more her thing. And she could use that to talk to him, communicate with him, until one day he locks her up in
The attic?
in the attic. Thank
Yeah.
you. And then we see this sort of like attic and basement mirroring, and men and women exchanging their kind of positions. Who's hiding whom? Is it hiding to save, or is it hiding to actually kind of destroy? I can't even say kill or something, because it's really about owning and destroying the whole essence of this young woman in the novel. Because she keeps losing her touch with reality and with herself as we go, right? She's locked in this attic. She can hear that there is life going on somewhere around her, but she's sort of like melting into the shadows and the darkness of the room. And while, of course, the gentleman who's hidden in the basement he's not probably enjoying his days either.
Not so much, but at least, they're talking to each other. The old man comes over to visit, they try. They're doing their best.
They're doing their best. Like, he obviously is also described as becoming paler and smaller in the size, right? But at the same time, he's still alive, and he still has all these memories of things, and thus hope, sort of, that something will remain wherever.
Oh, yeah, and I think it's really interesting that within the novel, the first thing that the protagonist of the novel loses is her voice. Whereas in the memory police protagonist, her voice is the only thing she still has at the end.
Yeah, that's the thing that remains. And I found this so elegant and so mind-warping, I guess, to kind of see these parallels, because it's like one of those images, of like things being twisted and spread in space, reflecting each other, but being the opposite. Of course, this other novel, it kind of has somewhat of an ending, I guess.
Sort of. Well, she writing those really like individual sentences to try to somehow create a fragmentary ending for the novel, right?
So we kind of find out what happens. But then again, that other novel is also something that has potential of continuation, right? A sequel could be a thing, because this protagonist of the novel within the novel, she is kind of substituted with someone else. Right, because he's going to bring a new woman into this attic and lock her up there when she loses her voice. And in that novel, he basically, I think this typist, his sort of drive is the fact that, like, he wants to take away the voices, because then they're silent. When they're typing, his students, when they're typing, they're silent. So this is all about like owning, taking away their voice, and by proxy, the rest of them, their identity, they're just being, existing. And I feel like maybe that is somewhat of the answer to what's happening on the island itself. Why the things happen that happen. It's really all about control and manipulation is not the strong enough word, I guess, for this sort of.
I think it works.
A demonstration of control, I guess. Yeah.
But it's also, kind of something we do in our own minds too, isn't it? It's kind of really a little bit of a question about what is existence and what do we need to exist. Like, is it a voice? Is it our bodies? Is it birds? Is it hats? Is it, all these things that we lose, that we forget? Like, what identifies us? I think it's somehow related to existence by means of control, because obviously we're in society that's controlled by governments that puts laws and these kinds of things on how we can behave, how we can react. I think that's a big part of it. I think it's a very deeply philosophical novel, I think it's got a lot that's, I don't know, it would be interesting to read some papers on it, what other people pull out of it too, because I think just the layers as you peel back, because in its essence, it's easy to read. You can get through it, but emotionally, okay, philosophically, but it's got all these like really delicate layers, that you just have to really peel off just carefully.
It is as incredibly elegant. I mean, the prose, we said, is not complex, but it is elegant. And yeah, there are a lot of layers. There's this novel within a novel trying to kind of show you what the protagonist isn't understanding about herself and then what's happening to her. But I don't know. I mean, like there's these, the memory police, this authoritarian angle. To me, I actually keep going back and thinking about how it's kind of perpetuated within the community as well. They do it to each other and to themselves. And it kind of makes me think like you don't get governments that can pass these really like, I don't know, racist or misogynist or homophobic laws until the society perpetuates those ideas first and puts people in power who put these rules into place, right? Like internalized misogyny, women enacting the patriarchy on other women is a thing that happens for a reason, And I'm like, I think there is a layer to this novel that is also a little bit about that.
For sure.
That like if you have these memories, like the memory police come and find you and take you away. But it's like if you have the object, you have to hide it from your neighbors because your neighbors could be the ones who out you.
One thing I couldn't find much of really was the Japanese reception to this novel. I'm really curious about that.
Like reader response.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, this book won a major prize, didn't it?
In Japan, yeah, I think it did.
I mean, that has won a lot of prizes.
Right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the book was well received by readers. Like, what was its cultural impact in Japan is what I'm curious about. Like, the thing is, it does have this authoritarian air. And I mean, supposedly she has said in the past that the idea, that reading Anne Frank kind of gave her some feedback for this novel. And I think that does put it into some perspective. But the novel in itself is not threatening in the way some dystopian novels are, where you have authorities like the memory police. And I find that really interesting too. And that's why it also carried me to a place of more like what goes on in our own minds instead of something actually happening in the world, because it's not so, it's not
as heavy-handed.
Right.
Before.
Right. Yeah. It's not like, say, The Dream Hotel, which was very kind of a horrifying existence. Yeah. So, it was, it's not a dystopian novel in the sense that you think of this really kind of frightening world. It's kind of still a beautiful world, even with even in the loss of like the roses. It was very beautifully kind of written of how this happened, and the rose petals just, in the water and in the sky and just floating around. And yeah.
But I mean, there's this really slow creeping horror throughout the novel, and it really it waits and gives you this really serious impact at the end. But like, the weather is getting worse, and food is becoming scarce. Like these people are starving.
Right.
And it's this kind of like, are we glad that they start forgetting their bodies? Because, I hope that one of the first things to go is their stomachs so that they don't have to be hungry anymore. I'm like, it's very scary. It's just got a very delicate touch about how it presents the fear.
Absolutely. And like the moments at some point when this spring never comes, right? Because they're like, oh, yeah, we're running out of food. You have no proper nutrition, right? It's really hard to find. But like the spring is coming. And when the spring comes, it's going to be better. And then spring never comes.
Yeah, because we've forgotten spring.
Yeah, and I'm like, and then it's constant winter, and it's a cold winter. It's the one with the snow, and yeah, so it's really disturbing. It does create this subtle feeling of doom, I guess, incoming. But I was also reading it at the same time as I was reading The Dream Hotel. And for me, these two books kind of like mixed together so tightly. I'm like, because I was reading The Dream Hotel because we really wanted to record that episode and I loved the book. But at the same time, I had to put away The Memory Police for a bit. And I could not. I was like, no, please. I need to read this. I can't not be reading it.
Right. Yes. Well, and what I read most recently was Elif Shafak's The Island of Missing Trees. And I'm like, that's something is mixing in for me. Yeah. Memory and like carrying things forward into the next generation and like, what is R going to do after the end of this novel in The Memory Police? And I'm like, man, we spend a lot of time as a society thinking about memory and legacy. And yeah, I don't think there's any easy answers out there.
But at the same time, as in this world, the winter's there permanently, it seems. There's a lack of food. The characters still kind of don't even react to it in a way that you'd think, oh, they're suffering. It's very matter of fact. She goes to find some food to make a meal. She sees her friend, the old man, it's all, and I guess that's something we do as a society. Even when times get hard, we still kind of go through these motions and experience and just deal with it.
Yeah. Well, and this is something that is pretty common with the Japanese style of literature. There's this very pragmatic approach to these situations that I think you see it a little bit in the book The Wall by, is it Marlene Haushofer? Something like that? I am not sure. She's completely alone and has nothing and has to somehow figure out how to survive. And a lot of the book is these very pragmatic, well, so then I made a pen for the cow, like it's very like, you don't have time to sit there and wallow in your feelings. You have to survive. Yeah. But yeah, it is something that's a little more common with Japanese writing to focus on these really practical aspects and let the emotional stuff happen internally as you're reading and not tell you what you're supposed to be thinking or feeling about it.
I appreciate that a lot because, I think just that's what we look for in our literature.
I mean, and I say that as though I'm some kind of authority. And I'm like, no, I'm reading this stuff in translation into English.
Right.
And it's only going to be stuff that has won these big prizes that gets translated usually. So do I really have a good handle on Japanese literature? Not really. No. Right. But it is an element that I've noticed in the ones that I have read.
Just to kind of sort of wrap back to, Laura, what you said about the sense of grief, and maybe that is actually the explanation as to why the characters are not actually perceiving the bad state they're in, like because they just don't have capacity for this anymore, because they have only enough power to keep going from day to day without actually having even more mental space, emotional space to actually dedicate to realizing that they've lost it. Because in here we see this descriptions of what they lost as holes in their hearts, right? They're like, oh, I feel like there is an empty space now where something used to be. I don't necessarily remember what it was, but I do know they are aware of the losses they had. They just don't really have emotion about it. And maybe that's why they don't really have it, because of this state of grief. Like they do actually experience it. It's just so big that they can't perceive it,
Yeah. Like the grief is in so much control over how they live their lives that they can't actually see the forest for the trees.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, that is the way grief is, for sure. I mean, and I think, it also kind of explains why the protagonist just kind of, she doesn't disappear, but she loses all these aspects of her body that's ultimately crumpled up in this space that she created to save her editor, as just a body that doesn't even do anything. It's just parts that are lying there, lifeless.
Well, and she is disappearing. You know, at some point, she is only having an awareness of her voice. And of course, R standing there being like, you still have a body. I can see it. And he's like describing her body to her and she feels nothing about it, you know. And eventually he will have to walk away, right? He can't fix it. And if memory of how to speak and her voice goes, then she will just be lying there.
Right.
And there will be nothing of her. Mm-hmm. It's such a bleak picture, you guys. This is such a sad ending. And I just thought to myself, like, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about R, right? You know, it's like, were they in love? I don't know. I don't think they were depicted as lovers necessarily, but just as these people who really desperately relied on each other. And I'm like, what kind of grief is he experiencing about losing her, this person who's been keeping him alive and the only person that he can speak to? He's really only a voice as well at this point.
He also holds the key to all the memories, too. So he's also a personification of memory.
Yeah, but I think one of the things that I found, you know, this minuscule little light of hope at the end is the implication that he's not the only one. Right, that there are others who also still have their memories and that they'll be able to find each other and piece something together later.
But I think, again, you know, not to like beat the dead horse's beat, but, you know, this is something that kind of happens. You don't get over your grief, but you shed your body and you leave that part somewhere. And then you go back out in the world and you become something else. It's
like
kind of
metamorphosis.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, because that grief, that person, it still exists in me. But I've kind of, you know, put her to rest and, you know, go back out and live my life. But that grief is still there.
And in what you say, I absolutely agree. And I also hear some Piranesi in it.
Yeah.
Oh no. What do you mean?
Because that's, I feel like, what happened to Piranesi as a character, right? He was Matthew Sorensen, and this is a reference to one of our first ever episodes of book club discussions, that he was Matthew Sorensen before, and then he forgot it. And then he became someone else, Piranesi, in the house.
And then he had to leave the house, but he was still Piranesi when he left. But he was also trying to figure out how to be Matthew again.
And that kind of resulted in the third identity for him, because he said, like, I'm definitely not the same person I was before I entered the house. I'm definitely not Matthew anymore. But I'm also not really, am I just Piranesi? Probably not. And I'm like, that's probably what this is, like a very similar imagery, I guess.
Yeah, like there's this third person you become after your experiences. You're not the person before. You're not the person you were in the depths of the despair either, but now you're this person who's had both experiences.
And this is how we yet again come back to Piranesi.
Well, I think, you know, I do compare this book, the experience of reading this book, to Piranesi, from the impact of it, from the layers, from the way it makes you feel and think. You know, I don't think every novel does that, but, you know, we've read a few now that I think do that, or we've discussed these books. I put The Dream Hotel in a similar place, that these three novels really evoke the same feeling in me, as far as I need to think about them. I finish reading and I need to spend a few days just kind of simmering on my thoughts and what exactly it is that has moved me about the novel. So I think they're all certainly the same class of novel.
Not every novel can be life-changing for every person, but I think the three of us have such a similar taste that we know which ones are going to be life-changing for all three of us. Piranesi is definitely one. I think The Memory Police, or for sure. Like it really has been clinging to me. I think I first read The Memory Police a year ago, and I have never stopped thinking about it And I have been like, I want my book club read it. I want you guys to read it. Everybody, please read The Memory Police because I need to talk to someone.
Yes. I have to say, so normally when I finish reading, if I write a review or something, I usually like put the book on the bookshelf. Like I have the bookshelves for books I haven't read yet, and then the ones I've read. And there is like a bit of classification going. That one, I was like, I came to the bookshelf. I was like, I'm going to put it there now. And I was like, no, I'm going to have to keep it somewhere on the table, on the desk. And then it's been migrating around my apartment for now. But I'm like, I don't think I'm ready to put it back like on the bookshelf where I don't have it like right there that every once in a while I just see the cover and I think about it. It is really, really hard to exit this novel. Just like, close the cover, done. No, this is not how it works.
That's definitely been my feeling as well. Like, just every few weeks, I'll have to go find it on my bookshelf just so I can look at it and be like, yeah, I remember reading this now, you know? Yeah. Hey, what would happen if we forgot novels?
God forbid. That's like my entire...
There was a novel about that.
Oh, like, that would be so bad for me. Like, that's my whole personality.
I know, right?
Books is my whole personality.
Oh my goodness. So yeah, I think this is definitely one that we highly, highly recommend, but it requires being in a certain mindset to read because it will absolutely devastate you. It will cling to you. It's rough.
Yeah.
Do a buddy read.
Yeah, that's a good idea. A little bit less.
And I do think it's, it's from 1994, but it is really, really impactful in the digital age because we have this, and I would say not just the digital age, but let's call it the COVID age, where time and memory has gotten really slippy for a lot of people in the past 5 years, I think. So I think it adds even another layer now.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what makes it timeless, right? It can be applied to 1994, I'm pretty sure, and to now as well. We're going to wrap up at this stage. We're going to go read the next book. And you stay tuned to find out what it will be. Will it be such a heartbreaking read or...
God, I really hope we pick something a little more out for us. But we should. There is also profundity and joy, you know.
Absolutely. We'll work on that. We'll see what happens. So stay tuned. Come revisit us in 4 weeks' time for the next book club discussion episode. And in the meantime, you can always listen to our episodes where we interview amazing guests.
Yes.
Stay tuned and
read more books.